Jeremy interact with my baby boy was nothing short of magical. My son's obsession with Jeremy was immediate, and it has lasted to this day, many, many years later. And as an older mother who was and is incredibly protective of my own child, I knew then that Jeremy was honestly one of the only men I would ever trust with the care of my son. And honestly, at the time, I even trusted him more than my own husband, and I love my husband. But he is incredible, and he's compassionate and kind and honest and amazing. I was gifted with the opportunity to deliver all three of their children, and we have since become great family friends. We do outings together. We've gone to the Polar Express and the Georgetown Railroad and breakfast with Santa many years in a row. And watching this man, Jeremy Cooper, care for his children is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. As a physician, this case obviously gives me great pause. It makes me afraid every day to do my own job and terrified to go to work and take care of other people. And I continue to do it because I love what I do, and I know that Jeremy loved what he did, and he was incredibly good at it. We've heard that from everyone here today. I know, because I'm one of them, that people who dedicate their lives to serving others go into these fields to take care of everyone, not just some people. And the first responders have a job unlike any other. And I know this now because just last year, actually just a year ago, I witnessed an incredible tragedy in my own neighborhood, just outside my back door, where a man had a heart attack in a car, and he ran into another parked car, almost hit a pedestrian, and was passed out over the wheel of his own car. My husband broke the window, took this man out of the car, and then called me to come and do compressions. And I'm a physician, I know how to do this, but I have to tell you, I knew nothing at the time. Like, I was absolutely terrified beyond anything I'd ever experienced, despite my 20 plus years in the hospital. So these people who come and respond to our emergencies as members of this society are special, more than anything I've ever known. And this entire situation is a tragedy. Lives have been changed forever. The level of grief is unimaginable, and I know, as a practitioner who's also lost people in my line of work, that Jeremy will never, ever forget this day or the experience he's had. At the end of the day, Jeremy Cooper is a gem. He's a kind, intelligent, and I'm going to cry if I look at you, upstanding member of society, and his family absolutely needs him. I also ask, Your Honor, that you take all of us into consideration in our words today in your sentencing of Jeremy Cooper, and I thank you so much for your time.
And our final speaker before Mr. Cooper is Dr. Eric Hill.
My name is Eric Hill, E-R-I-C-H-I-L-L. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Dr. Eric Hill, and I'm the medical director for the Aurora EBS system. I'm here to speak to you today as you decide your decision on sentencing for Jeremy Cooper. The events of August 24th, 2019 had an absolutely terrible outcome, and the loss of Elijah McClain has been felt not just by his family and his friends, but by me and everyone in Aurora Fire Rescue, including Jeremy. I remember vividly being called about this case the following day, the morning of August 25th, and the numerous meetings that were had about this case over the following years. I want to speak to you about the very first meeting that I had with Jeremy and his crew to review this call. It had been several weeks since the call had occurred because I could not perform a review of the call during the investigation which left Jeremy and his crew waiting weeks to be able to discuss the call with me. The sentiment expressed by Jeremy in that review was that of being sick to his stomach, sick over how the call happened and what happened. The loss of a patient stays with you as a healthcare professional. All of them in that room showed nothing but concern for Elijah, confusion as to why his heart had stopped in the ambulance. Jeremy showed what every medical professional should: empathy and concern for their patient, a desire to understand what had happened so they can learn and apply those lessons to help future patients. In healthcare, sometimes patients can be harmed despite our best intentions. Our obligation is to always, to our patients and to the public, is to learn from these instances, improve, and take steps to try to reduce risk going forward. I discussed the system issues before, so I just wanted to briefly remind Your Honor of a couple of key points. In 2018, the EMS providers were given training on ketamine, which included alternative dosing strategies which were not approved by me and were not consistent with the protocols at the time. In 2019, there was no policy or guidance to define how or when EMS take control of a patient being restrained by police. In 2019, Excited Delirium was still extensively trained to both police and EMS professionals across this country with the goal of trying to prevent patient deaths. 4 years later, all of this has been resolved and no longer true. There is one thing that nearly everyone in reviewing this case had in common. We all knew the outcome before we reviewed the case. And that fact made all of us prone to hindsight bias. We reviewed the case knowing the outcome, which focuses our attention to many subtle things which are often not appreciated in real time. Every physician who gave their opinions on this case spent hours watching the videos, and despite all of that, the numerous physicians had very different opinions as to what was actually occurring. I said nearly everyone had that in common because Jeremy and his crew did not know that final outcome, and they had mere minutes to figure out a very complex medical condition that was ongoing. Paramedics are trained to look for patterns in patient presentations because they often don't have the full picture. It helps them determine a treatment course. And within the first minute of walking up on that call, the presentation was for someone who could have excited delirium, which he'd been trained was life-threatening if he does not rapidly intervene. Unfortunately, many of the things in the subsequent minutes afterwards he was seeing and hearing supported that conclusion, and very little did not. Had Jeremy walked up 5 minutes sooner to hear Elijah speaking coherently, none of us would be here today. I recall the prosecution asserting the paramedic's decision to use ketamine was to get rid of a problem that night, but nothing could be further from the truth. After handing off patient care to the hospital team, Jeremy and his crew waited outside of the treatment room in the ED that night until Mr. McClain had his pulse restored and was stabilizing, and took time to speak to the physician about what was going on with Elijah. Those are not the actions of someone who wanted to get rid of a problem. Over the last 3 to 4 years since this case, I've had the chance to get to know Jeremy. His character has been spoken to by many others today, but I want to share something that has been said to me several times now by him. He's expressed a desire several times to teach the lessons learned from this night, to share his story with others and first responders and EMS everywhere. And that's despite all this going around him, he's thinking of others and he just wants to help. I hope Your Honor can appreciate that Jeremy Cooper was acting with good intentions that night to try to render care in a very difficult environment. His actions were guided by what he believed was the appropriate care for him and nothing else, and that you will show leniency in your sentencing with him. Thank you.
Judge, if the court will now hear from Jeremy.
Yes.
Jeremy Cooper, Jeremy Cooper. As I stand here today, there's so much that I want to say, but I don't even know how or where to start or to how to say it. There's so much I want to say to everyone, you, Your Honor, the jurors, all those who have been impacted by the events of August 19th, 2019. From Elijah to his family, to his friends, to everyone at AFR, everyone in the first responder community, and to my family, and I find myself just stuck. Without knowing where to begin or how to say everything, it is I want to say, what I would like to do now is just talk to Elijah. Elijah, I am a man of faith. I know you are here among us, and you can hear me. I wish I wasn't standing here talking up to you, because that would mean you were here. There's so much I want to say to you. First, I want you to know how sorry I am that I couldn't save you. How beyond and forever devastated I am that I didn't get to hear your last words. I want you to know that I would give anything to have a different outcome. Elijah, I never ever meant for anyone to hurt you. I was shook and shocked when I saw you slam down. I just wanted the ambulance to get there. I wanted to take over your care, and I was scared. I believed you needed immediate medical attention. I wanted to calm the situation down. I wanted my presence to be enough, and my training and my skills to be enough. I am so sorry collectively that we all failed you. If I could go back, if I could know more, if I could do things differently, God, how I would. Knowing everything I know, I just find myself sick, wanting to wake up from this nightmare. I wanted to save you. I want you to be here with us. I want you to be able to hug your mother, your siblings, and your friends. But I know that that isn't possible. I don't pretend to understand the why of all of this, but I can pledge you that when I spend my remaining balance of my earthly life trying to learn and grow and try to understand the why, and I will never forget you. Elijah, I want you to know the man I am and why I became a firefighter and paramedic. My sole dream in life was to help others. I was born and raised in southern Colorado in the San Luis Valley. My dad drove a truck until the loss of one of my brothers as a newborn. And other medical problems sent him to go to med school. He became a physician's assistant. He practiced medicine for over 25 years, and he was also a volunteer fireman. My mother was a dental assistant, and then a stay-at-home mom. I was the oldest of 5 kids, 4 boys, and 1 girl in my family. I have worked in some form or fashion since I was in grade school, doing everything from farming jobs, mowing yards, being a gas station attendant, working in a lumberyard, and even setting gravestones. In 1996, I took an EMT class with a college buddy and fell in love with the work. I worked at the local hospital-based ambulance company and volunteered with the fire department for 7 or 8 years on graveyard shifts in an emergency room on the ambulance. In order to earn my paramedic license, some coworkers and I drove 2 hours each way, 3 days a week to go to medic school. Because I was the closest town at that time that offered the paramedic program, and I was still working full-time. In 2002, I was lucky enough to be hired on with the Aurora Fire Department. While working with the Aurora Fire Department, I had the privilege to work on 2 of the busiest engines for over 18 years. Although these shifts were incredibly busy and often led to sleepless nights and thousands of calls a year, it was fulfilling. I loved it. I was able to work for and for some of the best crews. I was able to push myself to better myself by working alongside the best for so many years. I was a field instructor for paramedics for 15 years. I was on a hazmat team and a tox medic for 15 years. I taught EMT basic and medic courses at Swedish Medical and Red Rocks Community College for 10 years. With the Aurora Fire Department, I was fortunate enough to be recognized by my peers for several awards. I was given the Distinguished Service Medal, 4 Emergency Operation Awards, a 2000 Flood Campaign Award, the 2012 Aurora Theater Shooting Award, Community Service Awards, and multiple Phoenix Awards. And through all these years, I never once had a complaint from a patient, a patient's family, or a community member. This is my core, and this is who I am. I've always strived to help everyone and everybody, to treat every person with care and compassion. I've never cared about the color of someone's skin, their religion or non-religion, their culture, their sexual identification, their gender, or their socioeconomic status. I chose to stay in Battalion 1 because this is the community I loved. It's where I went to church, and it's where I volunteered. I love being able to help people with different needs from so many different backgrounds. I never ever in my life wanted to harm anyone. I've had the tremendous privilege of bringing over a dozen babies into this world. I've had the heart-wrenching task of declaring loved ones dead. Or trying to save a loved one right next to the one I couldn't help. I live with these deaths. Some patients stick in my heart, and they had more than others. But every day I went to work, and my sole desire was to help. As this case unfolded, Elijah, I've heard people suggest I didn't help you because you were black. My God, that couldn't be further from the truth. It makes me sick to even think this. On this night, as I arrived on the scene, I believe I did what my training required. I thought I was helping you. It never entered my mind the color of your skin. It never entered my mind that by standing by your side, watching you while I waited for the ambulance and giving you ketamine, that I would hurt you. All I wanted to do was help. I will live with these decisions of this night, and I will live with your soul in my heart for the rest of my life. You are one of those patients that will be with me forever. You will be right alongside the mother and son I saw jump to their death from a burning building while they waited agonizingly for water. Alongside the mother and infant killed in an automobile accident where I couldn't tell the baby's injuries ended and where the mother's began due to their devastating injuries. Alongside the 2 infants I tried so hard to save from a burning building, losing one at the scene, well, trying to save the other, only to learn that they had died the next day at the hospital. Alongside the little boy who chased a ball into the street, and I had untwisted his body from the drivetrain of the truck. Elijah, like you, these deaths are unbelievably heavy on my heart. I can't bring you back, but I can and will keep your spirit alive and moving forward. I will never stop trying to learn and improve to help others. Elijah, I want you to know that I have 3 young children. I met my wife later in life. She is a certified registered nurse anesthetist and a woman of faith, an incredible mother, and amazing wife. Together, through the incredible blessings from above, and the miracle and science of IVF, in our 40s, we welcomed 3 kids into the world. We, as a family, tried to get back to our community, to love and care for all. We volunteered, we chose professions of service. We raised our kids to be the best they can be and to always help others and to be kind. Elijah, everyone talks about you, talks about your gentleness, your forgiving nature, your kindness, and your love to your fellow people. I believe you are exactly the same type of person as I believe myself to be. I would have loved to have known you. I would have loved to be able to talk to you in person right now, but I know I can't. What I can do is continue to talk to you in my prayers. I will give my life trying to honor your spirit. I will do my best to try to unite our communities, to try and to continue to help and serve my fellow beings and try to spread love and light, not division and hate. My children will always know your name. I vow to spread kindness and generosity in your honor. With every simple wave, every hello, every person I've had the privilege to serve for the remainder of my life here on earth, I want to bring peace, harmony, compassion, and caring, and do this in your memory. Finally, when the time is right, I want to walk alongside those who loved you and hear more of your stories and how sorry I am for them as well. I want to bring our communities together. I want you to work to fix all the broken pieces of a system that went wrong on the night we met and be a part of change moving forward. I thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, it has been my pleasure to represent Jeremy. This case, in over 2 decades of practicing, hits harder than any other case I think I've had, and I've had some hard ones. I talk not only as an attorney, but I also talk as somebody who has walked alongside the incredible grief the McClain's have gone through. 26 years ago, as I was raced into the hospital in early labor, my sister and her husband were in the hospital with their son, who was dying from a doctor's mistake. As my labor continued, my sister and her husband went through 3 of the brain test exercises that we heard about in this case. And as my sister's son left this world, my daughter came into this world. We could move forward as a community filled with bitterness and hatred, and it would be understandable if the McClain's felt that way, if their community felt that way. Or we can make an effort to understand and be compassionate and find the love and the fixes that we need to do. And I understand that temptation. I understand the temptation to be filled with hatred and distrust. But I think it's incumbent upon us right now more than ever to slow down and listen. And I fully understand the irony of what I just said. Because if everybody had slowed down and listened on April 24th, 2019, Elijah would be here. So the question is, what do we do now? Jeremy is a man with over 2.5 decades, a quarter century of service. Impeccable service. You know better than anybody how hard it is to be a first responder and not have a complaint in your file. And he had none, absolutely none. Jeremy is a man who went to work to try to help. He is not a confrontational man, and I think that also played into what happened here. Some of the other people you heard from today, I don't think would have stood back. They're more aggressive. They're more confrontational. They're more willing to challenge. That's not Jeremy. Jeremy did not want to make a situation worse, and I again fully understand the irony of that statement. As we move forward, you have a hard task. And you have to decide how to balance the incredible tragedy of Elijah's death with an appropriate sentence. And we know the things you have to factor in, Judge. And that's why we had you listen to so many people. Because who Jeremy Cooper is can't be seen on those body-worn cameras and can't be heard. Those body-worn cameras will haunt me as I move forward in life. And I'm married to a police sergeant, and I have a daughter that rides ambulances and another daughter that serves in medical services in our Army. I also have a son-in-law to be who is Afro-Caribbean, Jamaican, and he's a doctor. And he lived about a mile from where this happened and was a medical student at CU at the time. So the parallels and the uncanny ironies that this case reveals are not lost on me. But I think we can do better by giving Jeremy a chance to help unite this community. I've been to see Officer Chikuniak, and he's being warehoused He's being warehoused, not able to do anything. And you could do that. You could lock Jeremy up, and you can take him away from his kids and his wife, and he'll be warehoused. And the reason they have to be warehoused is because of safety. So, Mr. Chikuniak sits at Sterling, a maximum security facility, because that's the only place they can keep him safe, in isolation. Jeremy Cooper could be in the community, and I challenge you to do the hard thing. Put him back in this community. Have him do community service that starts to unite and heal. Have him do the teachings that need to be done so no other fireman, no other paramedic, and no other Elijah McClain are in this situation ever again. Help him unite this community. He can do it in so many ways, and there are so many programs. He will never be a practicing paramedic. He will never be a practicing fireman again. But he has a lot to offer to fix what went wrong this night. His character is impeccable. This is a Class 5, nonviolent, non-enhanced felony, and it's the only time he has been in the criminal justice system or the traffic system. He comes before you with the lowest LSI score I've ever seen. He presents no risk of harm to anyone else. So, Judge, I would ask you to be courageous and to give him probation and to give him meaningful community service. And I will make sure it happens. And whether we get parks named in Elijah's name and he cleans them, whether he teaches other young paramedics, whether he volunteers at the Ministry Alliance or the NAACP, whether he volunteers at the Ronald McDonald House, it can be meaningful. And I want to underscore one thing to everybody in this room. Jeremy has never, ever used this opportunity for himself. And I know, Judge, you have read the letters we've submitted, and you know Jeremy comes from a diverse family. So to have people accuse him of the...
I'm sorry, our electronic devices need to be off in the courtroom. Go ahead.
Certainly. To have somebody suggest that he took action or inaction because of the color of somebody's skin hurt more than anybody can ever imagine. And that's why those letters were given to you. Thank you for your time and your tolerance and for listening.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I believe that Ms. McClain would like to address the court, and I'll go get her.
closer. Excuse me real quick while I adjust the microphone. Hello again, Judge Warner. Thank you for this opportunity to speak here today for my son, Elijah McClain's justice and his legacy. I am Elijah's mother and his present parent. I have stated this on numerous occasions because it is the truth. First, to address the previous comments. No one can say that they have a similarity to my son's murder if their son was not murdered by killer cops and firefighters. Where was the fire that night? Where was the fire emergency? Jeremy Cooper was a threat to my son and an accomplice to my son's murder on August 24th, 2019. We are not the same. Do not say anything to me or mention my son's name in my presence while you enable and support an evil, careless legacy of a delusional mindset. You cannot evoke my son's name to absolve you of your own sinful nature. You betray yourself and your attempts to disrespect me here today, like Jeremy Cooper's disrespectful lawyer. It all shows your culture will not change because you find no fault in your actions. Never forget, your people in your community has an unlawful beginning in my community. When the opportunity presents itself, a person's thoughts, words, and actions will always show the beast in that man. The lack of humanity in your comments are not a surprise at all. Eternal shame on you all. When I repeatedly looked at the videos of my son's murder by Aurora, Colorado's hired hands, I wondered why no one took the time to look within themselves to do the right thing. Instead, everyone there the night my son was murdered looked outside of themselves in order to follow the directions or inactions of others. No one looked within themselves to hear what my son was actually saying. Instead, they looked outside of themselves and committed their souls to the evil actions that caused my son's murder. Everyone there the night my son was murdered eagerly rushed down the road of corruption by their own egos and ignorance. They all failed the city of Aurora and every member in the communities of Colorado. I wondered what I would say today because I have already said so much. I have already experienced so much. And I am sure I still have much more to endure for my son, Elijah McClain, to rest in his power. Jeremy Cooper is the person that injected my son with the lethal dose of ketamine while my son laid on the ground unconscious from the brutal attacks of a bully with a badge. Jeremy Cooper followed the crowd of cowards and displayed his immorality through the lens of his own cluelessness. Before Jeremy Cooper injected the drug ketamine into my son's unconscious body, Jeremy Cooper did what he felt was best. He did nothing. Jeremy Cooper did not check for my son's pulse. Jeremy Cooper did not conduct a thorough examination to see if my son was breathing normally. Jeremy Cooper did not interact with my son or ask my son how he was doing under the weight of a monster. Jeremy Cooper was there for more than several minutes before my son said his last breaths. Jeremy Cooper heard my son talking and was there for my son's last words. But Jeremy Cooper just stood there like a drug dealer waiting for his sale. When did firefighters become drug dealers who are paid by the city governments to forcibly cause an unwanted overdose? Nothing Jeremy Cooper can say will bring back my son or remove my son's blood from his hands. I have seen nothing in Cooper that shows he regrets his actions, from his lies on video and his attempts to cover up being an accomplice to my son's murder to the lack of guilt in his eyes. The trials have been exhausting but worth it because I stand here for truth. I stand here for love. I stand here for light. I stand here for justice. And I stand here for my son, Elijah McClain. I am not saying that I am a better representative of what American values should be, But what I am saying is that America will never be what it could be because it does not look at all of its citizens as one race, the human race. Treating people how you feel they deserve to be treated is very different and the complete opposite of treating people how you yourself would want them to treat you. Again, I'm here to witness the sentencing for Jeremy Cooper and his participation in my son Elijah McClain's murder. Human justice does not come anywhere close to what true accountability is. So I will continue to say, meditate, and pray for divine justice for my son, Elijah McClain. From my heart to my hands. Long live Elijah McClain, always and forever. Thank you, Your Honor.
The life of Elijah McClain mattered. He was a young man with great promise who dedicated his life to helping and healing others. But when Mr. Cooper met Elijah McClain, he did not say one word to Elijah. He did not lay one finger on him and did not ask for even one piece of equipment to evaluate him before he decided to inject Elijah McClain with a lethal overdose of ketamine. When Elijah pleaded right in front of Mr. Cooper's eyes, "I'm trying." When he pleaded and utters his last words, "Please, help me." There was no, "How can I help you, sir? What's wrong? What do you need?" Indeed, there were no words, and there were no actions at all. In short, the defendant treated Elijah with callousness and indifference, and his actions killed Elijah McClain. The defendant, Mr. Cooper, is the person singularly most responsible for the death of Elijah McClain, and he is the person singularly and most principally responsible for the crime of criminally negligent homicide that killed Elijah McClain. Mr. Rodema may have more moral culpability for the force and the excessive pain techniques, the conviction for third-degree assault. Mr. Chikuniak may have greater legal culpability for the extra offense of second-degree assault and the fact that he admitted on the stand that he knew 500 milligrams was too much under their protocol. But Mr. Cooper has the highest legal culpability, principal, primary responsibility for the death of Elijah McClain and the series of choices that led to that result. For there to be real accountability in this case, the court's sentence needs to reflect the fact that Mr. Cooper is the most responsible for killing Elijah McClain. I want to talk briefly with Your Honor first about the life of Elijah McClain and why it mattered. Second, about why Mr. Cooper has primary and principal responsibility for Elijah's death, and what accountability means and what that means for the sentence in this case. The court has heard, both from me and during the trial, a lot about Elijah's life, and the testimonials of the people who were close to him are heartbreaking to think of now. Elijah was a young man who was full of light and brought that light into the lives of others until the defendant extinguished that light. Those close to him would talk about how if there was a fly in the massage office, he would catch it in his hands and release it outside rather than kill it. The video of him going next door to the pet store to play his violin to comfort the baby kittens there went viral on the internet after this incident. He worked and put himself through hundreds of hours to become a licensed massage therapist so that he could help and heal people with his work. His grateful attitude towards life and towards his fellow members of the human race was evident in his defining characteristic, and it appeared even in this trial. Even going that night that he was killed to buy iced tea, he gave his signature gratitude bow to thank the clerk who rang him up. One of the letters from his colleagues at Massage Envy that was submitted prior to this hearing for the court says, "You just can't forget his soul if you were touched by him. You would know if you knew him for even 3 minutes." But even after the defendant, Mr. Cooper, arrives at the scene, as Randy Rodema is slamming Elijah McClain to the ground and telling him, "Stop," Elijah isn't fighting. He's not angry. Instead, he pleads, "I'm trying," and utters his last words, "Please help me." When Elijah said those things, the defendant was right there, standing at his head, looking at him. He was primarily responsible then for the series of events that killed Elijah McClain and resulted in the conviction of 3 individuals for criminally negligent homicide. Mr. Cooper had medical control of the scene. He was responsible for examining Elijah McClain. He was the one who made the call to give ketamine rather than another narcotic. He was the one who made the call for 500 milligrams, the maximum dose that they could possibly give, and an over 50% overdose over what would be appropriate for Mr. McClain's weight. He was the one who personally administered it. And he was also the one standing there, failing to monitor Elijah McClain, leaving him prone in violation of all of their training, and left him untouched and unmonitored for 6 minutes, until finally, they first check Elijah's pulse to find out he has none. The first time the defendant did anything that actually could have helped Mr. McClain, he was already dead. All of those crucial decisions, not initially checking for Mr. McClain's pulse, not asking him a single question after learning that he speaks English, and not conducting any sort of physical examination, all the way through the wrong decision to administer any ketamine. That even Dr. Hill just mentions, if they'd talked to him and he was coherent, they would have known that they shouldn't have given him any ketamine. Just ask him some questions after you find out he speaks English. Those decisions, to be indifferent to what was happening to Elijah McClain and to make no effort to determine what was happening to him before deciding to max out an overdose of ketamine, 500 milligrams, the most they could give, is why he has primary, in a legal sense, principal responsibility for Elijah McClain's death. And that relates directly to accountability and sentencing. I think it's important that everybody recognize and thank everyone who's appeared on behalf of Mr. Cooper and shared their heartfelt experiences with him. That history that he has of service and even heroism are real, and they're important for everybody to acknowledge, even the prosecution. That past history of service, though, makes it all the more tragic that the hero of another's story is the villain of Elijah McClain's. Mr. Cooper is not being sentenced for his life, but instead for his choices and actions on August 24th, 2019. Those choices had real and terrible consequences. Overwhelmingly, the worst of those being the death of Elijah McClain, a 23-year-old young man who was just walking home from buying iced tea. But another consequence of those choices and actions is the conviction in this case and the sentence that will result. And that sentence needs to reflect the seriousness of the choices and the seriousness and horror of the consequences that resulted. A sentence to incarceration in this case is not a sentence about hatred or anger, as Ms. Beggin implies. The people, the court, indeed all of us, should proceed with respect and even love for every other human being and every defendant who appears in these courts. But respect and love for each other and for defendants does not mean that serious crimes go without serious consequences. Holding that duality in our minds is hard. It goes against our basic instincts to categorize people as either good or as evil. But one of the greatest dangers in our society is not what we think of as pure evil, but it is often the indifference of otherwise good men. A sentence of incarceration is a recognition of the seriousness of this offense and the horrible loss that it caused for the McClain family and for Elijah's friends, colleagues, and for his community. It is also, frankly, a recognition of the lack of personal accountability that Mr. Cooper has shown. He has shown true remorse over the death of Elijah McClain, but not a word during the trial or here today about how he was responsible in taking actions that went against his training, that went against basic understanding of what one human being should do to another, and that caused Elijah McClain's death. Instead, Your Honor, frankly, and especially during the trial, what we heard was dissembling. You may remember one of the first slides from my rebuttal close that showed the interview Mr. Cooper did after this incident with the police, next to the actual video of what happened. And in the video, Mr. Cooper says, yes, Elijah McClain was fighting even while we were giving him the ketamine. He was fighting even when we were putting him on the gurney. When side by side with that, you can see the footage of Elijah McClain somnolent, unmoving, in terrible medical shape, the furthest that you could possibly be from fighting. He makes the false claim that he did check for Elijah McClain's pulse prior to administering ketamine, when he places 4 fingers on his shoulder blade. When his own expert says that to a reasonable degree of professional certainty, as a fire medic and a chief, that there's no way you could take somebody's pulse in that scenario. In his interview, he says that Elijah McClain was fighting so violently that he was trying to crawl away up the embankment. There is a complete lack, not just of personal accountability for his choices and his failures, but frankly, a perception of what happened that is completely divorced from reality. The choices that Mr. Cooper made not to examine Elijah, to give the overdose of ketamine, and not to monitor him while he was pinned down prone, and not to do anything for 6 minutes before they found out he was dead, make him primarily responsible for the death and for the crime of criminally negligent homicide. We believe that that makes incarceration the most appropriate sentence. We agree with the pre-sentence investigation report recommending a sentence to the Department of Corrections as the most appropriate sentence in this case. If the court is inclined to consider a sentence to work release, like the court previously did in Mr. Redeema's case, you have the legal authority to order up to 2 years of work release as part of probation under 18-1.3-207 sub 1, as discussed in our sentencing memorandum. Given primary responsibility for Mr. McClain's death, and given his principal role in the crime of criminally negligent homicide, any such work release sentence should be at the higher end of that range to reflect his level of responsibility and accountability for these offenses. Mr. Cooper is principally responsible for failing to assess Mr. McClain by failing to ask him a single question, lay a single finger on him, or use any equipment to monitor his medical condition. He is principally responsible for the wrong choice of choosing to give any ketamine to a young man who was in medical distress, but was clearly not excited or delirious in any way. He is principally responsible for the amount of ketamine that was given. He was the one who ordered 500 milligrams without discussion with anyone. He is also principally responsible for the lack of monitoring. After he administers that injection of 500 milligrams of ketamine to Mr. McClain, the defendant is the one who is by Elijah's head, who is seeing him being pinned down, clearly in contradiction of their training and their protocols. He can see that Elijah McClain is not moving. He's not resisting. He's essentially already comatose, but does nothing to check on him until finally, after a few minutes, Mr. Udima slaps his face to see if he's awake. He's primarily responsible then for ordering him moved to the gurney, but then when he does that, he continues not to evaluate or monitor Mr. McClain. Indeed, in his statement, he says that Elijah McClain is still fighting. I'm sure the court has those images of Elijah McClain flopping back like a dead fish onto the gurney, just like the rest of us do. He wasn't fighting. And the defendant, Mr. Cooper, is primarily and principally responsible for the fact that the first time anyone even tries to take Elijah McClain's pulse is 6 minutes after they've given him a massive overdose of ketamine at this defendant's request. And when they first take his pulse, they find out he has none. The first time they do anything for him, he's already dead. Because of that primary responsibility for Elijah McClain's death, Mr. Cooper also needs to have primary accountability. Elijah McClain was a young man walking home from buying iced tea. With his last words, he begged Jeremy Cooper, "I'm trying. Please help me." But instead of the help that he was pleading for, Elijah McClain got a massive overdose of ketamine, and this defendant left him there, prone, with no assistance, until he died. And that's why the court should sentence Mr. Cooper to a sentence of incarceration that reflects his primary responsibility for the criminally negligent homicide of Elijah McClain.
As I mentioned earlier, the court has had the opportunity to read the letters, and I listened carefully for those who spoke on behalf of Mr. Cooper, as well as those who spoke for Elijah McClain. And the matter comes before the court for sentencing in this matter, as Mr. Cooper was convicted of the offense of criminally negligent homicide, a Class 5 felony in the state of Colorado, pursuant to 18.315 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The court may impose a sentence anywhere between probation or a sentence of 1 to 3 years in the Department of Corrections, followed by a 2-year grade of parole. The court mentioned this at another sentencing hearing, but I think it was mentioned here during the sentencing arguments, that criminally negligent homicide is not considered a crime of violence by the Department of Corrections. So the truth in sentencing is that one who goes to the Department of Corrections is eligible for parole after serving approximately 37% of that sentence, and eligible for a sentence to a community-based sentence even sooner. So the court has taken all that into consideration. Mr. Cooper, you have 49 days within which to appeal for conviction. If sentenced to incarceration, you have 126 days within which to request a modification of your sentence. You do have the right to be represented by counsel for the purposes of your appeal. And if you are found to be indigent, the court could appoint counsel to represent you in that appeal. I don't intend to reiterate the evidence that was presented at the trial. Suffice it to say that the body cam videos were painful to watch. And here, the court doesn't find, and the jury didn't find from the evidence that Mr. Cooper purposely gave Elijah McClain the overdose of ketamine. I think the way that Mr. Slaughter has characterized it is indifference. The court sees it based upon the verdict of the jury as negligence. Certainly, Mr. Cooper injected Elijah McClain with an amount of ketamine that was more than the protocols called for a person of Elijah McClain's size and weight. What was clear from the body camera videos was that Elijah McClain was in an acute medical condition prior to the injection. And as was mentioned, the life of Elijah McClain mattered and matters. It's almost unthinkable the way things rolled out is the facts and circumstances in this case. And I've tried to put some sort of label on it, and I'm unable to do so other than I watched this movie a long time ago called The Butterfly Effect, and it starts with the contact with Aurora police officers, and things, rather than getting more calm or better, just seem to get worse every moment for Elijah McClain. The court also notes the somber reality, unfortunately, that there was no effective protocol, at least none that were used with respect to the transfer of command, in this case, between law enforcement and medical personnel in situations like this. And as a human being, certainly, I understand Ms. McClain's words, which he says, we've got protocols, we've got policies, and we've got rules, but we also should hopefully, in situations, in dire situations, indulge in the best agents of our nature, our human instincts to help people. Certainly, Mr. Cooper was at the scene for a sufficient amount of time to have intervened. Yet he was in a situation, and the court notes that there was some oversight, certainly, but part of the testimony, even from the expert witnesses, indicated that they have to rely upon the information that they get once they arrive on scene. And I'm not saying that Mr. Cooper wasn't on the scene for a somewhat significant amount of time, but there were a number of things that occurred prior to his arrival that were significant. He was in a situation where he was obliged to rely upon the information relayed to him by really the only witnesses that were there, and those were the law enforcement personnel. That information that was relayed was clearly deficient. The court has to look at the nature and the elements of the offense. The court notes that the jury verdict did not reflect that Mr. Cooper's actions were performed after deliberation, intentionally, knowingly, or even recklessly. The verdict reflects the jury found that Mr. Cooper failed to perceive the substantial and unjustifiable risk that Elijah McClain would die, and in doing so, grossly deviated from the standard of care that a person would employ in this situation. The character and rehabilitative potential of the offender. Here, based upon what I've heard today from the friends and family of Mr. Cooper, and again, there were scores of letters, I have no doubt that Mr. Cooper's general character is of a good quality. The court, based upon the overall circumstances, finds that the rehabilitative potential to really be largely irrelevant in this situation. There were aggravating circumstances, and some of them were articulated by Mr. Slaughter, and certainly an aggravating circumstance in any sort of crime or offense is the death of an individual who really fell into a situation that was no fault of his own. The mitigating circumstances the court must look at include, the court does believe that Mr. Cooper is contrite. He has no criminal history. This is his first brush with the justice system. And further, that he has dedicated his life to helping other people, but those efforts weren't terribly apparent on the night of August 24th. The statutory factors the court must look to are in 18-102.5 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. That's to punish a convicted offender by assuring the imposition of a sentence that's deserved in relation to the seriousness of the offense. Under subsection B of that same statute, it recognizes that part of these goals are to assure the fair and consistent treatment of all convictors, all folks convicted by eliminating unjustified disparity in sentencing and providing fair warning of the nature of the sentence to be imposed and establishing fair procedures for the imposition of sentences. Interestingly, in the court, the Department of Corrections used to, in their yearly reports, kind of have a nice published handout, I suppose, for the legislators so they could figure out what was going on. But I always took a look at it before I imposed a sentence. Unfortunately, they've kind of lumped a whole bunch of offenses together, and it's not much of a help for a judicial officer to try to find sentences in similar situations. I did my best. And in 2023, there were a couple sentences handed out for criminally negligent homicide in the state of Colorado. In Montezuma County, there was a case where it was a gentleman who was hunting and shot and killed another hunter who was sentenced to 90 days in jail. Another hunter with a bow this time in Garfield County, who was sentenced to 6 months in the county jail. Going back a few decades, and we discussed this case during the trial, Nathan Hall, as I believe what his name was, and that was in Summit County. He was an expert skier who was out of control and killed another skier while he had alcohol and marijuana in the system. He was sentenced to 90 days in jail. With, I suppose, some irony, a law enforcement officer, and I'm forgetting his name, it's Eduardo Landeros, was, I don't know if he's a rookie, but he's mighty close to it, a police officer who was responding to a non-emergency call in the evening in a relatively busy neighborhood, going nearly 100 miles an hour with no lights and no siren, that ended in the death of an individual who had nothing to do with the call. Mr. Landeros was sentenced to a year and a half in the Colorado Department of Corrections. The next one is somewhat shocking to the court. And it's, I suppose there are a few parallels, but the situation in this case was a physician, Dr. Kim, who his patient was put under anesthesia for a cosmetic surgery. That patient, who was 18 years of age, became non-responsive, and Dr. Kim instructed his staff for a period of 5 hours not to tell anybody. Eventually, after 5 hours, Dr. Kim figured out somebody better be called so this young woman could be taken to the emergency room, where she lived in a vegetative state for a period of time before she died. Dr. Kim was sentenced for the count of attempted reckless manslaughter, also a Class 5 felony. And I'm sure there are circumstances that the court is unaware of, but Dr. Kim's sentence was 15 days, which, again, I'm sure there were other circumstances that were much different than what the court saw in this case. Under C, to prevent and promote respect for the law by providing effective deterrence to others who are likely to commit similar offenses. And I'll take that into consideration. There's certainly some relevance. To promote rehabilitation by encouraging programs, correctional programs actually, that elicit the voluntary cooperation and participation of convicted offenders. As the court mentioned earlier, the court does not see rehabilitation really as an issue in this case. E, to select a sentence length, and a level of supervision that addresses the offender's individualized or individual characteristics and reduces the potential that the offender will engage in criminal conduct after completing the sentence. Here, looking at the individual characteristics of Mr. Cooper, the court would find that the potential for future criminal conduct is really not a factor the court needs to consider in this case. The next factor, under subsection F, to promote acceptance of responsibility and accountability by offenders and to provide restoration and healing for victims and the community while attempting to reduce recidivism, which again the court does not see as an issue here. But other than recidivism, there are factors in subsection F that the court must weigh and consider in this case. Somewhat unusual after being on the bench for 18 years, and then criminal for at least half or more of that, and being faced with a situation where you have somebody who has really dedicated his life to helping other people, and yet being involved in a case of this nature where a young man died for really no reason. And at least from the courts listening to the numerous experts from both sides who testified in this case, it occurs to the court that it didn't have to happen. It could have turned out much differently. In this case, the court, in weighing all of those factors, is going to impose the following sentence. The court's going to impose a 4-year probationary sentence. As a determined condition of that probationary sentence, Mr. Coop will serve 14 months in a work release program. He will complete 100 hours of useful public service. The court will stay the sentence in this case until June 7th. That should give Mr. Cooper plenty of time to make arrangements that, if possible, he will be able to continue his employment. That's going to be the sentence in the judgment of the court.
Your Honor, we had discussed
I think I'm in the process of changing my staff, I guess. So my preference would be, if possible, we could do the cost of prosecution hearing for both Mr. Kuniak and Mr. Cooper at the same time. That really makes sense to the court. My judicial assistant, who's assisting me now over in Broomfield, her name is Nicole. So I'm going to ask the council to try to collaborate and find a date, and then reach out to Ms. Nicole, and we can try to find a date that works for everybody.
Okay, and I got just one moment. Okay, and then Judge, I may have one other motion to file. It's long enough today, so.
All right.
Judge, just administratively, I think the order of the court also needs to reflect that there is no restitution request or order.
Oh, you actually had that written down, and I forgot to mention it. The sentencing order in this in the case will reflect that no restitution is being sought. Court will be in recess.
won. Always and forever. The bullshit ass laws in America don't mean shit. We won. Elijah won. Elijah's legacy is forever, and their legacy is over. That's it, and that's all. America is full of hate. It's full of racism. It's full of inequality. Nothing here is balanced for everyone. They don't care about us. They never did. America's origins are built on racism, slavery, torture, brutality, rape, and an egotistical mindset. They are not better than us. No one is better than us. We have been through too much as a race and as a culture, and we are still here. And we are not going nowhere because you brought us over here. Deal with it. Any questions? All right. Have a good day. Good. It's over. This is done. You know what I'm saying? No matter what American states' laws or sentencing is, Elijah won. And they're a disgrace. Forever and eternity. Y'all still snapping pictures. Ain't nobody got no questions? Because the truth is out there. They couldn't hide the truth. They tried. But Elijah won because the truth is out there. And he is a heavenly being. He's not in hell where they're going. Elijah's in heaven with the Most High God. That's why I say that.
Did you have any expectation going into this?
Not a damn one. Not at all. You know? It all comes down to, when you sit here and think about how the laws are in Colorado compared to the laws in other states, Colorado is very lenient on their own employees when it comes to their own crimes. So I wasn't expecting much at all. Nothing at all. I guess that's why I'm happy still.
Ms. McClain, what's next for you in your cause?
I don't know. Good question. I am working on my spirituality, which has gotten me through all of this. But just doing everything I need to do to help myself continue with my life and continue to be a good parent to my children.
Do you have any other legal recourse in this case?
Good question. I'm thinking about that too.
Perhaps a federal case, civil rights violation?
No, ain't no federal case. Colorado ain't prosecuting nobody, as you can see. They didn't take up this case real. Something would have been said a long time ago. I don't know why people are in these offices with these jobs getting paid all this money to just sit there and do nothing. But that's what all of our tax dollars do. It makes sure that they can sit there in their self-righteous positions and do not a damn thing for us.
How do you want your son to be remembered?
That's not up to me. That's up to my son. Elijah's legacy is not on nobody but Elijah. I am standing here as his mother to say that. It is not up to anybody to help other people remember his name. Elijah did that all by himself.
Does today's sentence bring any closure? I know it's probation, but after 5 years of sentencing, the last of 3, I guess just how are you feeling? Does it bring any of that?
The only closure it brings me is that this shit is over. That's it. I don't have to sit in this well-constructed building and hear all the bullshit-ass laws anymore. I'm done with that. Next.
What's your thoughts on a possible appeal from Randy Rodema then? I know you said you think it's closed right now, but Rodema still has an appeal filed out there.
Who fucking cares? It don't matter. For eternity and forever, he will always be scum. It don't matter what he does. It doesn't matter what anybody else do to wipe the blood of my sons off their hands. It's already there, stained. So fuck them all. Fuck them all.
What's next for you?
I'm probably about to go do some housework. That's what's next for me. Back to my daily routine, you know.
What is your daily routine? What does that even look like?
I clean up a lot. I love cleaning up. I love organizing. It helps me to process the trauma.
Form of therapy then, in other words, right?
It is very good therapy, honestly.
Metaphoric too, huh?
In a way. Yep. Cleaning up. You know, that's what I do. I clean up. I'm a Scorpio. I transform. And I transform in positions where I need to be because things in this world need to transform. God put me here for a reason. Elijah was chosen before they targeted him. And I was called to this position because we have all been cultivated in this bullshit ass environment. Long live Elijah.
Elijah McClain.
Y'all see my red, white, and blue? Because I'm an American too.
I thought you were going to be over there.
Watch out for them stairs. Okay. Look at you. Oh, it's all good. You got yourself.
I don't know. Where's your park? Okay, cool.
over. I watched the whole thing. Man, I had my popcorn. I was like, damn, look at that zoom. Yeah, so right now,
you.